My name is Deborah-Jean Carlton. So from 1999 to this point forward, there's been a lot of transitions, a lot of transactions. So when we talk to Russell, I'm going to call him Russell, I'm going to call him Chief, he's my friend. I'm going to talk about what happened in 1999. And I'll just give you a little hint somewhere in here. You remember that game that we played when we were kids? Capture the flag? He captured the flag. But this was in real life capturing the flag. And the flag is the most important part of a country. So imagine the U.S. left the flag like the golden goose exposed. And they were more concerned about what they could do with the feathers and making down comforters and things of that nature, but not protecting the golden goose. And we're going to find out how Russ even knew about the flag being up for grabs. And we're going to call it up for grabs because everybody in the government in the U.S. was asleep at the wheel. It was a third and final bankruptcy that had just ended in November 1999. So imagine that ended. And when that happened, the U.S. was no more. There's no more republic. So it was in disarray. So we're going to talk about the problem that happened in 1999, and then every presidential election that you've seen, what those have meant. We're going to talk about these wars that we've seen and how does that play into it. We could even talk about what just recently happened in North Carolina and how the folks didn't get any assistance. Like, where was the military? And they're saying, well, the military's not happening, but the military is saying, we're waiting for directions. We're waiting for some instructions. Well, who is the instruction supposed to come from? What happened? We have people all over America and this world. It's a problem. It's becoming a tyrannical issue, not just for the U.S., but for our borderless world, for those patriots. And God love you. Always saying, Constitution, Constitution, we have rights. No, I'm so sorry. When you got your birth certificate, it came with no rights. It was actually a fallacy. But we did have something as a constitution. But the Constitution for the U.S. was no more as of 1999. We're going to have Russ expand on that. Russ is known worldwide, globally. The top 1%, they know exactly who he is. I want you to know that he is the man. He's actually the king of the hill. When he captured the flag of the U.S., he actually set up the government. He runs all militaries. He runs the post office. He actually fired everybody in the U.S. government. We're actually going to talk about how that actually happened. And I know you're up here saying, this can't be. I would have heard about it by now. No, they want to keep it a secret. The U.S. doesn't want you to know that they lost their flag. Their most prized possession was up for grab and everybody was asleep at the wheel. Not Russ. He anticipated what was coming. And I want to know what kind of man he was at that time to have a gut check to know, what am I going to do about it? We're so worried about what is everybody else going to do that we just need to be responsible ourselves and us take it upon ourselves to do something to change the world. But he legitimately decided to change the whole planet. The whole planet. He took the responsibility. Okay, nobody else is going to do it. It'll be me. I wonder what kind of deal he cut with God. Like before he came here, did he say, you know what? I want to be that guy? Like who asked for that? And I think I'm going to ask him that question. So I said in here that they've kept Russ a secret. And you were saying, well, I should have heard about it by now because he's the most censored man on the planet. They don't want you to know the truth. They want to keep you entertained, watching sci-fi and reality TV. And you think you're watching the news, but you're really not watching the news. You're on every platform swiping back and forth. And yet you're saying, well, where are the details? No, they're too busy wanting to keep you in war and fear and worried about when your next meal is going to be and hyperinflation and this, that, and the other. It's all a mental construct. It's all to keep you busy. They don't want you to know that you can be liberated, but you have to take it upon yourself to want to know more and do more. It's just not on him. it's going to be on you as well. So we're going to get to know him. I know you can go do your research, so let me send you to all the appropriate places where you can go. You can go to warcastles.com. You can go to piercingdynasty.com. You can go for the claim of the life.com, lastflagstanding.com. The other thing is this gentleman, I'm talking about Russ, is doing the best that he can at every turn. Believe me, they're trying to sabotage. They really wish that he would just give up the flag that he actually took from them because there's somebody who was asleep at the wheel. They would wish that he would give up the flag, but he's not, because he's not that guy. In addition to that, I want you to get to know him just as Russell, because I get to talk to him about all kinds of stuff. We talk about basketball all the time because we're both ballers. I used to play D1 ball. He still plays, and he's in his 50s, pretty darn good. And we're going to talk about his childhood. I want you to get to know my friend. I know he's a badass and all the great things that he does, and he runs the entire world, but he's just a cool guy. And that's who I hope that you'll get to learn today. But you'll learn some other background things, the things that he did in 1999. And he just came back from Washington, D.C., and I can't wait for you to hear that news. That's got to directly come from him. I want to welcome my friend, my bud, the man with the plan, the most censored guy on the planet. It's true. And I want you to know, I really think he's a genius, the biggest genius of our time, by the way. I would like to welcome my friend and Postmaster General of our world, Russell-J. Gould. Russell, I'm so happy to see you.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, Deborah.
Oh my God, how are you doing?
Doing great.
I hear you just came back from playing some ball.
A little bit of ball. A little bit. I'm working on cardio right now.
Okay, we're going to talk more about basketball a little bit later.
There we go. There we go.
Were you doing that full court press out there? Were you doing the run in?
I'm working towards that.
Okay, good. We're going to have some fun.
Right on.
We're going to talk about your childhood if you're cool with that.
Okay.
I've got some little birdies that, some of the stuff you and I talked about, there'll be little surprises.
Oh my.
Some are other little conversations that I had on the side.
Okay.
So if these come as a surprise, just flow with it. Okay. We're going to have some fun.
I'm chill.
Guess what we're going to start out with?
What are we starting?
The Hells Angels.
Oh my gosh.
No, hold on. I got to give them a little bit of background.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, the Hells Angels is a motorcycle club. Now, the American Motorists Association, I don't know, back in the 50s, said that 99% of all motorcycle riders were law-abiding citizens. But here it is, the 1% weren't. So they earmarked the Hells Angels as the 1%ers. So it's supposed to be a bad label. But instead, the Hells Angels decided that they were going to use that as a badge of honor. So if I'm understanding correctly, in your backyard,
yes,
at your house,
yes,
you had numerous Hells Angels staying on your property.
Yes, I did.
Now, I know that they're rebellious and they've got their own ways of doing things, and they're really not about authority. So I want to find out, what kind of influence did they have?
So they came about to be in my backyard. My father was a gentleman that used to pick up hitchhikers all up and down the old I-99 freeway outside of SeaTac, Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. And we lived at the end of the runways. And in doing so, he was preaching to them his faith.
Yeah, because he's a preacher, right?
He was a preacher at the time. Yeah.
Yes.
And he would bring people to the house because they didn't have homes.
Wow.
And so it's pretty cool. And I was big into motorcycles back then.
I love them.
Yeah, and they had big choppers.
I know
with
they did.
Back then they had the big handlebars.
They're called hogs and stuff, right?
And I tell you what, just hear them coming, because you could hear them from coming down from the highway.
You mean like a mile away?
You could hear them from a long ways coming up to the house.
Yes.
There was one in particular guy that I really liked.
Who is he?
His name was Johnny Ambrose.
Okay, what's that?
And then he just was he had a lot of women in and out of there. He was a kind of a comedian.
At your house?
At my house, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. But he took the time to teach me about motorcycles and how to clean them up and fix them and make sure, the spark plugs aren't fouling and that sort of thing. So that was pretty interesting, just to learn about the mechanical applications of how engines work.
Got it.
And so that was pretty cool. And I learned a lot they used to talk a lot about loyalty.
That's an important subject. I don't think we talk about that enough these days. So tell me what you learned about loyalty.
Well, loyalty is unconditional.
Yes.
And so I learned about, never heard those terms before.
So you learned loyalty from the Hells Angels.
Well, I just learned about their perspective of it.
I like it. Go ahead.
Yeah, their perspective of it. And their perspective of it was, they were about their brotherhood, and they were about the things that they were doing. Some of the things they were proud of and some of the things they weren't so proud of. Learned about tough love, a lot of tough love moments.
So was that one of the lessons that you learned, was about how to deal with tough love?
How to deal with tough love, how to put a line in the sand, so to speak, and stick up for yourself. Learn about forgiveness, learn about, learning how to forgive. Okay,
so we've got a couple of lessons here.
Yeah.
Forgiveness, how to not basically take any crap.
Yeah.
And loyalty.
Yeah, I got to see a different side of the world. Back then it was a much freer society. They'd, roll in with their kegs of beer, and it was a party.
So your father was instrumental because he was a preacher.
Yes.
But also he had an antenna business, right?
He did. He was known as the Antenna Man.
Really? That was his nickname?
Yeah, that was his business name.
Really? So did he have was your backyard full of antennas?
No, back then. So he used to, he had a tree chopping business where back in the Washington area, they have big Douglas firs.
Yes.
And he'd go up on top, skate up these trees, and then cut the tops of the trees off and put his antennas up there so they could get signals. They learned how to string cable through back then. It wasn't so digital back then.
So it seems as though there's a thread here. From the Hells Angels, you learned a lot about mechanics, and then it also carries over with your father, right?
Yeah,
very mechanically
he was good friends with them. He was always out there talking to them about his faith, and just trying to lead them to a better life, teaching them about accountability. Some of the people that we had specifically were homeless, and so my dad always taught me that it's good to shelter the homeless. It used to rain a lot in Seattle. And so,
I lived in Seattle, by the way.
Yeah. Well, then a constant mist, right? Constant mist.
Can't get over 68 degrees. Like, what's going on?
You know it. Anyway, my dad made a point, even he'd go work and he'd come back at the end of the day, and he'd always bring an extra tarp or something because they were living in tents in the backyard. It's not like they were living, they had bonfires going and tents, and we had a big woods behind the house we're at the end of what they call Saltwater State Park, which was they had a little stream in the bottom and little fish, salmon running up at certain times of year. It was pretty cool spot.
I love that. Okay, so the other person that was very instrumental, who also seems to have given you an additional background in mechanics, is your grandfather. Like, he had a junkyard, right?
Yeah, he had a junkyard. He was out in Salida, Colorado.
So you would go in the summers to hang out with your grandfather?
Yeah, I would, yeah. Just learn how, take some of the things that he would teach me about, get up in the morning. You always had to get up in the morning, make your lunch, and go out in the field and just work and just really do quality work so you wouldn't have to repeat it. So you want to do good work so you don't have to repeat any wrongs that you may make out there. I was very blessed just to learn how to tear things apart. Yeah. The value of putting things back together, because you had to mechanically put things back together so they worked.
But we're going to talk about how you did that for America too.
Oh yeah,
because when you see things that are broken, you want to fix them.
I walk through the door.
And you're going to be okay. I know you do, but they don't know it. But we're going to let them in on it. The times are changing.
Yeah, people need full closure.
You're giving them that.
Yes, and upon full closure, they can make choices for themselves. Because I built a system that I don't have to actually police. It polices itself because it puts the accountability and the strength back into the people. And so it's a whole different style of governing yourself in neutrality, to not be swayed into these different belief systems or these war concepts, but to give people the autonomy of self-governance.
In my intro, I was telling the public about 1999. So I want you to know there's going to be a point in which we're going to talk heavily about it. And then I want to also hear about your trip to Washington, D.C. So I'm not going to let you get out of that. You're going to have to share, okay?
Yeah. Funny stuff.
So your grandmother was a science teacher. Now, you are not a science buff. You're a science genius. You are. You know it. Let's just say it. Okay. So you got the mechanical nature from dealing with the Hells Angels, your father and your grandfather. Yeah. Now, your grandmother has a heavy science background, and she wanted you to learn how to be an independent person. But did your love of science, because you're heavily involved, you have your own periodic table.
Yeah.
Monatomic table.
Yes.
Like you rewrote these things. And most of you, I know you're saying, what the heck is that? We'll get into that a little bit later. But the bottom line is you're heavy into science.
Yes.
You have a lot of technologies. And I know a lot of them have been stolen too, but that's all right. It's going to come back around, right?
Yeah. They call some of the stuff they would call disruptive technology.
Exactly.
It undermines the insurance and undermines the concept of going to a doctor. So we put cures on the table instead of the insurance gambit, the Medicare, and all this nonsense that they've been bombarding with their belief system.
Oh,
right.
Yes.
And it actually puts cures back on the table for society, where we actually get peptides and we actually get to produce ATP and all the different things.
Would I have to take an NAD flush shot?
Yeah. You know.
I know how your girl knows.
There's a lot of people out there that are geniuses in the concepts of curing our fellow mankind. But there's so much red tape in front of them. What I've done is I've lifted the veil, so to speak, off of the red tape, so that the creators out here that are geniuses that want to help mankind
won't be censored either.
Won't be censored.
Or come up missing.
Yeah. Well, they're writing in fiction. And they've set up what means that they're using adverbs, creating their nouns into verbs, adjectives, and pronouns.
Okay, so you bring up basically grammar in English, right?
Yes.
So you were at school, in summer school.
Yes.
And you started questioning the way English and grammar was being taught, right?
Yes, I did, at a very young age.
So, Russell, how old were you questioning these teachers?
First grade.
Okay, so Russ, are you telling me you went to your teachers and you said, this doesn't make sense to me? How did that come? How did you even start a conversation off? Is it raising your hand in class?
Yes.
So you're raising your hand.
I was in the front row.
No, where else would you be?
Yeah.
So I'm envisioning you're in the first row, the teacher's talking, and you've always got your hand raised.
Yes, and they said that they needed to wait till after class and then to talk to me because I was disrupting the flow.
You weren't disrupting.
No, I was questioning.
You were questioning, and that's okay because you're a genius. How can the thing is you were smarter than the teachers, and they didn't know how to handle that because they couldn't answer your questions.
They could, well, yes, and then I was very blessed because one lady in particular, and she saw how passionate I was about
grammar and English,
learning, just wanting to learn.
Got it. Okay, I get that
in general. And we made special arrangements with the school. I was going to a private school, and we made special arrangements with her to go to a summer class at her house.
So she was going to teach you. She had to figure out a way for you not to. You were being censored in school. Let's think about that. The censoring didn't happen when you got older. No. It was just a continuation of what was happening when you were a kid, because they were trying to shut you down at that time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And you got in trouble for this.
All the way through college. Yeah, for sure.
And you know what? That's a travesty. As your friend, I'm sorry that happened.
Hey,
but it didn't feel good. You know, like you're saying, hey guys, I'm just trying to ask a question, and I'm just asking for an answer. So instead of saying, Russell, I don't know, they'd rather label you somehow.
Well, they would just, pacify me, so to speak.
Okay. So what did that look like? Give me an idea.
Lot of different things.
Okay.
A lot of different things, from anywhere from wait till after class to talk. And then when I was a junior in high school, I threatened to run for student body president.
Oh God, they did not want that.
They didn't want
but
that.
You know what? That president stuff came up later.
Well, they told me.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
In high school, they just said, hey, because I was a shoo-in.
Right,
I was going to win.
Of course you were.
People liked me.
Yeah.
And so I was going to change all the rules to the school. I had different concepts because then I could hold school assemblies. I could
hold them accountable.
I could change. I could talk to the crowds.
Yes.
And explain to them how we can make our lives a lot more fun.
I love that.
Right? Because life is about having fun.
It is.
And you have to have passion for life.
We talked about that earlier. When we said, like, happiness that's what I want. Happiness. I want to enjoy it. Now, I want the full story. Where did the snowball fight come in? What happened with the snowball and the teacher? Well, I want to hear it.
I was a pretty good aim.
I'm sure you were.
And so I could hit everybody. I was trying to hit everybody in the head, of course.
Okay.
I was doing headshots. And I was winning the snowball fights. So a teacher instructed me to put my head down. And so I sat in this foyer of the school and I put my head down, and they literally forgot about me.
No.
But my dad was coming to pick me up, but he was a couple hours late. So I remember thinking to myself, this ain't right. My dad showed up and he's like, where's Russ? And they went to class to get me. I wasn't in class. I was out still in the foyer with my head down. My dad comes over, what are you doing? My dad saw me, what are you doing?
How long were you out there with your head down?
A couple hours, easy a couple hours. I was hot, sweaty. I had my snow coat on, right?
Yeah.
And I was pretty literal. I didn't take my coat off. I kept my head down. And so my dad said, who did this to you? I said, well, it was the PE teacher. And he says, well, let's go talk to him.
And you did?
And I did. I went and looked him in the eye and got him real close. And I crack him. That was actually the last day I was at that school.
Did your dad take you out?
My dad took me out and he said, you're not happy here.
And where'd you go?
I went to another private school down the road.
You played basketball. You're like you're talking about snowballs, but I know you've played numerous sports.
Yes.
Is it true that you made the varsity squad at 10?
There was not enough kids in the school to fill the positions.
Okay.
And so they seen me on the playgrounds, and I'm ripping them, little tiny kid. And then one of the guys like, hey, let's put Russ out there.
Oh my God.
And so they put me out there in playing other Christian schools.
Yes.
And I had a blast.
I know. Let's talk about that, about wise with choices. And when you got a little bit older, you and a few other kids got in a little, let's just call it a little trouble. You guys were out there partying.
Yes.
And you were there with some privileged children.
Yes.
And you're about 17, 18 years old? 17 years old. And they didn't get in trouble, but you did. Yeah. And you start thinking about why did you get in trouble versus why they didn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
So did that send you down a road of questioning?
Yeah.
And what did you find?
I found out what I didn't know.
Which was what?
A whole heck of a lot.
I know that's right.
At the time, I didn't know about how they got me into the building. But I knew.
When you say there, are you talking about the sheriff's?
The courthouse.
Okay, so you're at the courthouse.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm not comprehending about jurisdictions.
Okay.
And so I start to question myself, going, how can the other kids not get in trouble?
But you did.
But I do.
Would you consider this the tipping point that started putting you down the path of questioning the court systems, jurisdictions, and did it lead you into like flag authorization and flag law or anything?
Not that part there necessarily, but it definitely piqued my concern. And when I went to junior college first, and I started studying criminal justice based upon that experience, I'm like, how the heck did they do this?
Gotcha.
Right. And so I learned about traffic stops. I learned about all kinds of stuff, business law. When I got into business law, none of the attorneys could answer my questions.
Really?
Straight up.
So you're back to when you were in school asking questions regarding grammar. Now you're
asking questions
to the professors.
Yes.
And they can't answer your questions either?
They could not answer my questions at all. Yeah, not at all.
So all through school, you have these burning questions, and you're just trying to get answers.
I'm just searching for them. And
no one's giving it to them. So did you sooner or later end up taking your own education into your own hands?
I did. Now, remember back then, they didn't have the internet.
No.
So you had to actually...
Why are you trying to tell everybody that we're old?
Well,
remember we had Britannica?
Yeah. I read Britannica, encyclopedias.
You was for real if you had your own set.
I didn't have my own set, but I got to read them. A friend of mine had all what they call the U.S. codes.
Yes.
And so I read 1 through 50.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay, so you decided, I can't get these answers.
Yeah.
Professors aren't helping me.
No.
And what school were you at? Was the first you were in Wyoming, was it?
Yeah, I was at Casper College.
Okay.
And then I transferred down. I went down to Laramie, but that was just, I was playing basketball.
Okay, so you're balling.
I was hooping as much as I could.
Who doesn't want to do that?
Hey,
ball is life.
You can count on it. Bona fide hoopers.
Right.
And then I went out to Western Washington, and they're getting into, because the professors couldn't answer my questions.
Right.
what gave them the jurisdiction and the venue, and these are things that I learned in college. Hey, there's things called jurisdictions. There's this, they wanted, amity law, and then things that made no sense to me, hearsay laws, and which was subjective interpretation about certain things. Yeah, so I was like, wait a minute. I learned when I was young that everybody's unique, right? And so I grew up in an era where everybody got to make their own choices, and you'd win and lose by how you choose. Now, because of the Tavistock Society, they give everybody a trophy just for being there and tell you you're a winner.
I know.
Yeah, this is social engineering for a belief system, because they don't actually put in the hard work to become a winner. They don't actually, do the due diligence to make themselves a better athlete or a better, whatever.
So everybody wins. Everybody get a trophy. I remember us. If you won, you got a trophy. If you lost, you didn't get a trophy.
So what I like about the quantum system, what I've created, is everybody gets to be their own sovereign.
I like that.
And everybody gets to choose on who they let into their sovereignty and who they don't let into their sovereignty.
Okay, well, we need to back up just a little bit, because somewhere in here, you're doing self-study, right? Because no one's really answering your questions. Yeah. You left Western Washington because of a broken heart?
Yep.
And then you ended up back in Wyoming.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And did you go to school in Wyoming?
I did not at that time. At that time, I actually ran into what turned out to be one of the most influential men in my life.
Which was?
Which was David Wynn Miller.
How did that connect?
He was putting on a workshop in Wyoming.
Yes.
And I showed up there, and of course I was asking questions and cutting him off too. Just like anything else. Yeah. And he said, "Hey, why don't you wait till afterwards and we'll talk?"
And you did.
And we did. And I did.
Did you go there by yourself, or did you go with some friends?
My father was with me. And
your dad was there?
Yeah. And I knew some other people there. So I didn't know those people necessarily.
So of course you knew what that meant when Dave said, "Can you stay after class?"
Yeah. So I stayed there, and he was like, because at that time he had not figured out a lot of things. He was still learning too. But he said, "Well, what do you know about sentence structure?" And I started sentence diagramming for him and picking apart.
Did you tell him you've been doing this since the first grade?
Yeah. And he said, "You know all this?" I says, "I know all this." He said, "Well, keep studying." He gave me some data to study, and I studied, and I called him back. I said, "Can I call you on the phone?" I called him back, and we just started, becoming friends.
So you guys had a love of fishing. Did you guys?
Yeah. Yeah, he's a great fisherman.
So he became your bud.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And then that developed into a business partnership.
Dave was a fascinating guy. He was talking about things I didn't know about, flag communications, what courts were doing with grammar. He was writing in prepositional phrases, but he was writing in past tense and future tense. All the pieces weren't put together. And I was asking him questions specifically about order of operations of words, because these are things that I knew about.
So you're asking a little bit too much, maybe, or he needed to give you a little additional time for him to answer these questions.
Yeah, he was puzzled too.
Oh, we'll see.
He was puzzled too. How did I know all this data about adjectives at the time that we were using superlative, explanatory, declarative, and nominative, and some of these things of neuter gender pronouns and all these different things that I knew about. And so I got into that with him afterwards and sentence diagramming. He goes, "You know all this?" I says, "I do know all this." He goes, "I have a question for you." And I said, "What's the question?" He goes, "How would you like to run the world?" And I said, "Huh." I said, "How would I do that?" He says, "Well, just keep studying. Now let's talk about it." I said, he goes, "You don't know who I am." I says, "No, I don't know who you are." I said, "And I don't want to run the world." Well, I said, "But what I want to do," is what I told him, is I said, "I want to run my world."
That's a good response.
I said, "I don't want to run the world." I said, "Too many idiots. No thanks."
How old were you?
I was 25.
Still trying to figure things out.
Still trying to figure things out. I just knew that I didn't want to run the world, because people at that time, I'd had enough life's experience through work and just different areas of walking through my life that I was cognizant there was different educational values and moral ethics between cultures and between people. and really examining the phenomenon of belief of religious concepts. That really puzzled me because there were no real answers there, because you couldn't physically, show some of the tangible things that these different faiths are claiming. So always questioning and finding myself, trying to be a better person. And David and I sparked a good friendship. And he came out fishing the next summer, and we just hung out. And I was involved in some local traffic issues. I got involved after that, where I started standing up for myself. Simple things like, would you reach into the glove box and pull out your vehicle registration? Oh, and at that time I had enough knowledge to know you got a yellow fringe flag on. Who are you? Before I move, I know who I am. I'm secure in who I am. I'm secure in my paperwork here. I knew I had all the data that they were asking for. And, of course, it got me into the county sheriff was like, well, the judge sure want to hear about this. I says, the judge? What do you, I knew enough to figure out what I didn't know at a later date. Locked myself up many times between 1995 to 99. Yeah, just involved in many court cases, figuring out the scenarios. Had the judges must have liked me or something, because they started coming off the bench for me and taking off their robes and doing different things. And I was doing things. I don't want to get into the details because it's a lot of things dealing with venue and figuring out that the clerks were in fact in charge, moving the bills of the ladings and postmasters, the things that people that are studying the quantum grammar take for granted now. When they say, oh, you become a postmaster. Well, back then, David and I didn't even know what that was. Right, so all the things that most people take for granted in the venue that they give out at the workshops and people steal online, they don't know how hard fought. They have no clue on how hard that was fought for, just to figure those things out.
Let me ask you, you mentioned court and Dave.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing what that looked like? Because it seemed like that was a training ground for both you and Dave. And could you kind of tell me some of the things that you encountered or you discovered, or, what actually you learned in the process of things, or,
The judge's mechanical application, called a gavel, only makes a clang. Clang, 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 clang. But the clerk, when she puts her mark on things, it makes a chink, and it leaves a forensics of dates, right, or a file stamp.
Why is that important?
Well, because when you look at administrative mechanics, without the file stamp, there's no process in the court. And if there's no process, there's nothing being done. Just to get a file stamp, we had to learn all that.
Yes.
Right? Figuring out that the judge is an actor and is part of some kind of racket. You can't, at the time we didn't know about it being a shipping containment. We didn't know these things.
So you're saying that the legal system, from your point of view, was a racket? Like this was
if the judge
an organized situation?
If we got to talk to the judge and his gavel only makes a clang and his marks don't mean anything, why are we talking to the judge? Why aren't we talking to the clerk? Because when she puts something down, something has to get done.
Wow.
So we're educating the courts, we're educating the judges, and they were working with us. So the judges now, because of the ruling made out of the federal venues, the judges now across the United States were made shipping commissioners. And as a shipping commissioner, now they could tell the clerk what they wanted filed and when they wanted it filed. But before I got involved, the judges couldn't do that. It was only solely on the clerks. And so the clerks didn't have the necessary knowledge to deal with a guy like me, because I was just simply trying to figure out why I had to come to court to talk to someone. I'm receiving summonses with no process on it, and their own guidelines we're talking about without process. It's not legal contracts.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm getting the picture here. Mm-hmm. You and Dave are learning on the fly about what's happening in the courtroom.
Yes.
And while you're learning on the fly, the judges are also learning on the fly too, that now that their job is being amended to now that they're shipping, and the court's learning stuff too.
Yeah, yes? Absolutely.
And now you've gotten faced with the flag. And now you recognize the flag. And now the birth certificate, they're running a game on the people. And the people don't know that there's game being ran on them, right? Through the birth certificate.
Once you comprehend the levels of flags on planes, you would have to know a little bit about mathematics. I'm just going to say one phrase and people can go do their own search. Pythagorean theory is vectors in 3-space, vectors in 4-space. Once you figure that out, then you can figure out where you're at in time and space, right? And you have XYZ components of Carson's coordinates. There's a lot.
Yes, I see.
Okay, so being skilled in those fields, these were conversations that I had in the middle of the courtroom to prove my points. That's why you can't fake me in the courtroom. So there's a lot of people acting like me out there and thinking that you're going to go in and do this and do that. Courts are already trained. They already know what math looks like. They know what communication looks like, and they know who sets their terms and who is a slave to their terms.
Slaves. Okay, let's talk about how does one become a slave?
One becomes a slave through, most of the time, lack of knowledge based upon the birth certificate system. Now, in the United States, the birth certificate system, because it was tied up in bankruptcies, ended in 1999. So that now the birth certificate slaves, their birth certificates are no longer valid. So when they come up against someone that has a claim on the life always beats the fiction or the darkness, because the darkness isn't there, doesn't have authorization to open its mouth, or otherwise known as state of claim. So you have slaves that have good volition, probably doing good things out here. There's a lot of good people that are slaves. They just don't know they've been tricked into this participation with a birth certificate
in the
courts that doesn't have authorization to ship the birth certificate or them as a legal fiction, what they would call a straw man, into the venues. Okay, because courts are closed.
So in the court,
yes,
the judge has jurisdiction because the person has a birth certificate.
Yeah, because the people are tricked into not knowing, unfortunately. These are things that should be taught in business law. These are things that should be taught to our elementary students. And then the guys of the British Accreditation Regency, otherwise known as the bar, participating in timelines to trick people on contract. So they're running a gambit. It's more than just a birth certificate. It's more than just the flag. It's more than just the grammar. It's a quanta, which is a pluralism of all these things coming in this war that's been waged against us. So what I did in 1999 is I put a stop to them being able to set up a venue when I claimed the flag. So now what that means is now it gave a neutral platform for claimants to join the Title IV flag and use that to now start directing their own lives during time of contract.
Okay, so wait a minute. Somewhere in here there's a flag capture.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing. And in addition to that, I'm hearing a claim of the life. So
yes,
take me from somebody's a slave, and they can go into the courtroom, and then the judge is doing his shenanigans, because it sounds like there's some shenanigans going on.
There's a lot.
Okay. And then it sounds like if you have something called a claim of the life gives you that you're not in their jurisdiction anymore. Like the court system is there to manage the people. But if you have a claim of the life...
Well, in 1997, once we figured out that this was running off of the QSIP numbers and the birth certificate system, we had to do something different. And so we came with the concept of what's called a claim of the life.
How old were you about now?
27.
Okay, so 27, you come up with this idea that you and David, to do this claim of the life.
Yes.
And this is after or before he said, do you want to run the world?
This is way after.
Wow. Okay, so now you're in the court systems, and now you come up with this novel paradigm shift called a claim of the life. And what was the purpose? What was the claim of the life designed to do for the people?
Give the people jurisdiction of their own lives. And let me tell you, it drove the courts nuts.
How?
Because they lost subject matter jurisdiction.
Because you don't have a birth certificate. If you have a claim of the life, they don't have jurisdiction like they do over the slaves.
Yeah, and so what we were doing is we were docketing those claims of the life through the clerk's office, through the process of the file stamps, and claiming our own lives.
So It kind of sounds like to me there's a racket going on in the court systems, and they're utilizing the birth certificates against the people.
Yes.
Was it originally designed to be that? Was that the purpose of the birth certificate all along?
Yes, it was.
So birth certificates have been around for almost 100 years. You're saying a plan went into existence that said, we'll be able to manage the American public through birth certificates, and then you come up later, 100 years, with a solution called a claim of the life.
That is correct. I was the first one to put it through. David was, on the side, being a witness to this. When I published that, a judge came off the bench on that specific filing, and he said, "You're on a boat and you're all alone. Good luck getting to shore." Because I didn't know that I wasn't on the land. I was in Admiralty at the time. And at the time, and they were functioning under Admiralty jurisdictional guidelines.
Can you break that down just a little bit more?
They were functioning under the law of the sea.
Law of the sea, okay.
Yeah, and there are mechanics to that. There's different bailments, and I'm not going to get into the data on that. People must do their own research.
Okay.
And when I filed the claim of the life, I was basically on my own vessel, my own boat,
in the middle of the sea.
In the middle of the sea, and I had to figure out how to be the helmsmaster. And I came in and I got into all kinds of different maritime applications to study Admiralty functions, and that was a fascinating field.
But all vessels have flags.
All vessels have flags. All vessels have numbers. All vessels have names.
So explain to me, if you are a vessel, if he tells you you're out in the middle of the ocean all by yourself on a boat. Do you have a flag?
I got the Title IV flag. We filed for that on August 12th, 1999.
Wait a minute. Can anybody just go get a flag?
Not anymore.
So what flag did you go and get for you to have a flag?
The Title IV Sections 1, 2, and 3 flag. David had access to knowledge because of his acquaintances.
Okay.
And they gave him the necessary data to give us the necessary answers, so to speak, to know that the United States government was coming out of international bankruptcy in 1999, stemming from Benjamin Franklin and borrowing money in 1775.
So you find out that the U.S. government has a flag that's up for grabs?
No, I just knew that they were coming out of bankruptcy. And when you come out of bankruptcy, the first thing that you're going to have to do is set up a new venue. And you need a flag to set the venue. The second thing that should have been done, that wasn't done in 1999, is the federal government should have alerted the 50 states, and they should have had a constitutional convention to reauthorize state constitutions to set up a new government for the federal government paradigm.
So can you take me back just a little bit? I'm back to just the flag.
Yes.
You find out that the flag is basically unprotected.
It was going to be left for salvage. Derelict.
A derelict flag.
Yes.
The thing that's the most important to a country.
Yes. Was
being mismanaged. In other words,
when I met with the Pentagon on this, the Pentagon didn't even know themselves. They said we didn't even know this ourselves, because if they had known it themselves, they would have claimed it.
So how long has the flag been around?
Since the beginning of the 13 colonies.
So you're saying the most important thing to run the country, it's not just a symbol, it's the thing that sets the venue.
Correct.
Sets the jurisdiction.
Yes.
It's like the goose with the golden egg, like you never let it out of your sight.
No.
And no one paid attention but you.
That's correct. And that's what the Secretary of the Navy's office said, is like, holy cow, we didn't even know.
What? And you're like 27 at this time?
28, yeah.
So forget about how you did it. You knew that it was coming.
Yes.
And so we had a game when we were younger called Capture the Flag.
Yeah.
So you literally played this game, but you played it in real life.
I played it in a global level because I had to do that on an internet, what they would call an international level. And so I followed certain protocols of setting up venues. It took me into a lot of mechanical applications of diplomacy. That's why when I tell the stories, I met with 86 ambassadors at the United Nations. That actually happened, right? So this is a knowing, sitting in meetings, having these conversations about flag etiquette. What I figured out later on, and I don't want to skip ahead off 1999, but what I found later on was that there was an international, for better lack of words, maritime organization that had protocols to register flags. And I ended up syntaxing and finding those organizations to be 100% fraud under fictitious grammar in violation of Title 18, 1001, using false names and fictitious grammar to set up corporations. And I sued those international corporations. I rewrote quantum grammar, Nowspace paradigms for corporate structures to register flags for other countries. And I became the clearinghouse for registering flags on planet Earth.
So now you've captured the U.S. flag, and then you do flags for the entire planet.
Correct. But I do want to clarify something.
Please.
In 2007, I filed copyrights in quantum grammar on what they would call the customs flag, otherwise known as the peace flag, which is a group, which is an adjective pronoun called the American State Nationals, use my flag, but they don't have authorization to use it because
so they're trying to just steal your flag.
Oh, thieves! These are beginners, right? They've come and learned about this apparatus whenever the pandemic was, the COVID. And now all of a sudden you've got all these people propping up all over the place.
But the state nationals don't know anything about grammar.
No, the grammar is completely 100% fraud, so they can't actually state a claim. And yet they want to use the symbol of my flag as the symbol to recognize their country, stemming off of the War of 1812. And so there's mechanics. I don't want to get into all that.
Okay, so let's dial it back to you have the flag, you captured the flag, and you're 27 years old. You've put something in place called the claim of the life. You're out in the middle of the ocean by yourself per the judge, right? And you have a flag on your vessel.
Correct.
But you mentioned also you didn't know that you were just on the sea.
Yes.
You weren't on the land yet. So obviously that comes a little later. Yeah. So the conversations that you and Dave were having were mostly centered around grammar, because it seemed like you guys had this love for grammar. And
we were studying prefixes and suffixes and old dictionaries, and we collected a lot of old dictionaries and just really put our minds together to come up with a positive performance on contract words.
You guys are actually in the court systems doing some fishing too, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So while you're in court, this is like a training ground for you.
Yes.
You and Dave learned quite a bit.
Yes.
So this is on-the-job training. This is OJT.
Oh, yeah.
How did you get from, I got a birth certificate, that's not working, and now I got to create a new paradigm for myself that no one else has done?
At the time, we did not have the Nowspace.
Nowspace.
Yeah, we didn't know about the Nowspace. We just came up for the claim of the life. We wanted to take jurisdiction of our own lives.
So the Nowspace sounds like we're in school. Yeah. I don't know about you, but anytime I was in school, no one ever taught me about Nowspace. The only thing that I knew was
present tense.
Present tense would be Nowspace.
Well, no, because
in a sense,
pre means no.
It does.
So now you have no scent. So you're not in any tense. And so they created these negative concepts of prefixes and suffixes to words to deliberately move mankind out of the Nowspace.
So it sounds like a very, very coordinated effort that's been around for 100 years.
Yes.
It's being run through the court systems, and the court systems are not running on Nowspace.
That's correct.
They're running on what?
Past and future.
Why is that relevant that the court is running on past and future? The past is gone.
Because you're never there.
You're never there. And the future is ahead and you never meet it.
Correct.
So there was really nothing in between when you're in the court system.
Welcome to the world of fiction. It's the future and the past.
And the past from there to there.
Yeah, that's the fiction.
That's the fiction.
You can only be in the Nowspace. And so when you claim your words in the Nowspace and define your own words, you can control your own paradigms. And so what I've done is set up a global function for not only the private beings, but also corporate structures to now control their own paradigms, bypassing the subjective interpretations of the court systems the governments, and the corporations on a global level.
So people who just have a birth certificate don't have access to the Nowspace.
That is correct.
So you can only get the Nowspace access if you have a claim of the life.
Correct.
Do these judges have birth certificates or a claim of the lives?
No, they do not.
They don't have claim of the lives.
So how can a fiction look at a fact?
Oh, see, now, okay, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
So you have fiction dealing with fiction.
Correct. Fiction, the goal of fiction is to kill fiction. And so that's the depopulation agenda. Fact and fiction can never meet. Facts will always be.
Okay, so you've got a fiction judge.
Yes.
Dealing with fiction people.
Correct.
Because they're fiction people because they have a birth certificate.
And when you create fiction, you can create subjective interpretations and translations and force the people into anything they want. The courts. So
in the court system, they have their own verbiage called doublespeak. It sounds like
doublespeak, triple speak, quadruple speak.
It means whatever they want it to mean.
Yes, because there's no definition of
because it's all fiction.
It's all fiction.
So it's fiction language controlling fiction people.
Correct. Welcome to the planet.
That's the entire planet. It's just not the U.S. It's everywhere.
Well, it's everywhere. It's the slave colony.
So the planet Earth is a slave colony.
To the birth certificate.
But if you have a claim of the life, you only have, now you have access to the Nowspace.
Well, you have access, and in the Nowspace, it deals with neutrality. So when you're in a neutral position, you're not swayed by the subject matter opinion of hatred, the concept of a war, because you're in neutral, and in neutral, you're at peace with yourself, because you have to do self-work right there. You have to look at yourself and fix with the problems from within you, because you're a sovereign to yourself, which means you have to manage yourself.
So how does your languaging, I'm calling it languaging.
Yes.
How does your languaging change? Because over here in fiction, they're using fiction language, fiction grammar.
Yes.
Once you have a claim of the life, right, and now you have access to the Nowspace, because that's where you're living. You're a fact.
You're a fact.
What are you? You're not in doublespeak anymore. Because it sounds like that's like if you're in China, you would speak in Chinese, or Indian. You know, if you're in wherever France, you're speaking French. But what do you speak when you're in
the quantum?
The quantum.
So you would use the set or the prepositional phrase to preset your facts, and now you create a factual world for your business world, for your day-to-day utilities, all the things that you conduct your lifestyles in. And so you have to change the paradigm of how you approach, like setting up an LLC, how you set up a corporation, how you set up a trust. How are you conducting your world? So
this is a whole different world, because everybody's been brought up as a slave. Correct. They only gave us access to things slaves should have.
So you are actually in the world, but not of the fiction world.
When you have a claim of the life.
Correct.
And now you have access to grammar.
Once you get a claim of the life, you get put into study groups, and you start crossing and comparing notes with people around the world. This is not a race-based system. This is a system based on mankind, and I don't say human, because human means monster, so I'm not dealing with monsters.
Okay.
I'm dealing with mankind, who have consciousness, their consciousness cargo that gets stuck in the flesh body here in this paradigm, and it has to engage in earth space banking, or earth space corporate movement for their bodies, transportation, utilities, all the things that people have to conduct their lives here on planet Earth.
So it sounds like you have to learn to manage
yourself
in both areas.
The fact controls the fiction, because when you get to the land of contract, during the time of contract, only facts have jurisdiction. Because the fiction can't make a claim because they have no facts on the paperwork, therefore there's nothing there to make a claim against you.
Because it's all entertainment, basically.
You are in the world of the television, and you are in the world of the AI situations, of the false beliefs, and that's why they have done a good job engineering society. We talk about our competitiveness in basketball,
right,
to take the craft and the skillship away and give everybody a trophy saying you're a winner. You may have participated, you get a participation trophy. Okay. But you're not the winner.
So
The winner puts in hard work.
You understand the information that you're sharing here. Most people have never heard a day in their lives. You know, they go to school, they think everything's right, everything that they've learned, and now you're talking to them from a point of view of, hey, there's been a game afoot for over 100 years.
It's always about finding yourself in your space. You have to know yourself. So being a sovereign is not about a government telling you what to do.
Yeah, let's talk about sovereign. What does sovereign mean?
Yeah, it's about self-governance. It's about your ability to navigate yourself through this dimension of the space that you find yourself in. Everyone's got themselves in a little different space, if you know what I mean.
Right.
So everybody has different accoutrements or utilities or tools that they use for their now space. And so it's about making a claim of what words that you choose. And what we do in the quantum venue is we use positive performance words to create positive manifesting outcomes. So it's a different twist where a fiction attorney will tell you, you're going to go to a deposition. Mm-hmm. But the prefix DE means to separate from. And what do you separate yourself from? Your position. Well, why would you want to leave your position? Because the second you leave your position, you lose control of your facts.
So people have gone to school, including myself, all over the world.
Yes.
And we've gone to school. But now we're talking about me having to learn a new language. I can get a claim of life, and now I need to learn a new language. So where do they get this information from?
Well, thankfully, there's a lot more educated citizens globally that are in study groups in our paradigm, in the quantum venue, that are doing a wonderful job studying, comparing notes, what worked and what didn't work, and now establishing their sovereignty for their own platforms. So in 1999, when I comprehended that the United States Constitution was coming to an end due to its third and final bankruptcy, its last third strike on bankruptcy coming from the stock market crash of October 29th, 1929, at 70 years for an international bankruptcy, was 1999. And so I had to put kind of like the full court press on. I had to go in and file the necessary paperwork before they would elect a new trustee, which was the President of the United States. He was supposed to be the trustee of the Constitution. He was the head businessman, so to speak, of the charter, but the charter was gone. And so with the charter being gone, they couldn't elect a new president, a new chief businessman of a constitution that was no longer there. 60 days before the election, 70 days actually, before the election, I filed in on August 12th, 1999 for the copyrights and put it in quantum grammar. David and I did on the Title IV, Sections 1, 2, and 3 of the flag. The cool thing about this is I knew it would set up a new venue, a new paradigm.
Wow.
And I did not know how the federal government was going to vacate the presidency, but they did it, right? They fooled the American citizens with the Florida Chads and the Dimples and all this and that. And they took the ability to elect the president out of the people's hands. And it's never been in the people's hands ever since. And that's why they always wait for the mail-in ballots at the end. That's the big decider. Well, that's the Illuminati New World Order post office controlling the people.
And there's no presidents. They're just selecting the president.
It's just a selection. And the 2000 election was a selection because there was no charter to elect the president, because the guidelines to elect the president were no longer, because there's no longer federal government. Therefore, they had to go get through a writ of certiorari, which is a pronoun, adverb, verb, had to file the selection to elect a fake president, which was George Walker Bush.
This is due to the Florida Chad incident that happened in 2000.
Correct.
Oh, so in 1999.
Correct.
You have the flag.
They set
the venue. The Constitution for the federal government is gone.
Correct.
The Constitution for the states will be gone shortly thereafter.
Correct.
And somewhere in here now, a president, quote unquote, normally would be elected, but there's no election anymore because the republic is no more.
Correct.
So now it's just a selection.
Yes.
It's a ruse. It's a continuation of the ruse on the people.
Yes.
Hey, but the world calls them the president, but what are they? If they're not the president, what are they then?
They're really good actors.
Oh my God.
And they sway the emotions of people. And people are caught up into the subject matter of what's coming out of their mouths. And if their lips are moving, they're lying. If their hands are writing, it's a lie. And so everything they do is based upon a lie of fiction, because fiction is no longer on the planet in the Nowspace. There's only facts. And so it's just been selection after selection. The other thing that they do to trick the American people, because the American people are quite naive, is the Illuminati post office, New World Order post office, files their mail-in ballots and does their selection that way to change the outcome. And then they create controversy in the court systems, which are all based upon fiction. Under no law or fact shall be tried in court. And so it's just selection after selection, moving presidents out of the District of Columbia every 44 days. That way, nothing that they do, all their executive orders are for naught. They mean nothing to anyone. And the actors up on top are immune from what they're doing because the American people lack the education to comprehend the timelines of what's happening under contract.
What's the purpose of this? Why? Why is the ruse continuing?
Because the people lack the capacity to have knowledge of grammar, to control their own Nowspace. They will be controlled by fiction. So fiction will control fiction everywhere on the planet because fiction is going to kill fiction. That's its job. It's depopulation. So as fiction kills fiction on planet Earth, there will be nothing left of fiction. What we have to be very cautious of, and this is why I work behind the scenes and what I do, is because with the AI simulation that is taking over, right, the simulation of the beliefs system, which beliefs are only a swayed opinion of someone else's conclusion with no firsthand forensics by the people. So there's no knowing, right? There's no knowledge. Without there being knowledge, the people are destroyed. So the people are going to be destroyed here under their lack of knowledge. And the AI systems, through their fraudulent carbon concepts, a question for you. Do you think an AI robot needs oxygen?
No.
So if an AI system wants to take over, would it be wise for them to undo and change out all the hydrocarbons and how things are brought for photosynthesis?
I get it.
We have to be very careful. It's a very slippery slope here. And they put the self-assembly systems, the neural networking systems into the people's bodies. This is now a simulation. So you're not actually talking to humans anymore or mankind anymore. You're talking to a sway of emotion run by the military-industrial complex against we the people.
There is so much to this.
There is.
I mean, the layers, it's layers upon layers. I think the part that is so important and crucial is for the American public to know that there's no more presidents.
No, this is just
there's just a selection. They're actors.
Yes, they are.
And I happen to know the dude who runs the entire planet. Would that be you?
Contractually, in the Nowspace,
yes,
is where my venue is. And I can only be in the Nowspace. So contractually, grammar controls the Nowspace. So there's been a buoy system put up for the people to navigate because I built a system that I don't have to manage. I'm not going to manage people. People get to manage themselves.
That's what sovereignty, comes in.
I built a different style of quantum Nowspace.
Because they're used to being managed through the birth certificate system. So when you're over here in the claim of the life system, you're sovereign. You learn to manage yourself.
And I don't tell people what to do. I only show them the buoy systems that's been set up to allow them to conduct their own lives. And I can't tell people what to do. They have to tell themselves what to do. So they have to be cautious with this technology. Because if they use it for the wrong volition, they're going to lock themselves up.
I comprehend. So for people to gain more knowledge,
yes,
there are some resources that they can have access to. So forgettheclaimofthelife.com, piercingdynasty.com, warcastles.com, and lastflagstanding.com.
Yeah, there's a good volition on why it's called lastflagstanding.com. Because when I took down the paradigm of corporate structure globally to register flags, this would be the only flag that'd be left standing.
You know what, Russell, when I think about this,
it's a full court press.
It's a full court press. I love it, man. Thank you so much.
You bet. Hey, thank you. Hey. Heart to heart. Blessings on your journey. Keep learning. Former American citizens and citizens of the world. October 7th of 2024, I filed at the U.S. Supreme Court a contract for the selection authorization of a federal postal government for a leader, a candidate to lead the people. Because of the national security classifications that are within the case, I can no longer speak on the presidential elections, which are fraud. They are actually presidential selections. Because the controversies of the fraudulent grammar, fraudulent government corporations, known as the United States Incorporated and the United States of America Corporation. These are lax corporations that ended in 1999. But a ruse of craft, cunning, skillfulness has been played against the people on the former continent of the United States of America, and the Republic is dead. Because the Republic is dead, and because there is no Constitution, and there are no courts that can authorize a leader as a president, I have filed in contracts for a selection authority as a special magistrate judge on special duty at the U.S. Supreme Court to safeguard the will of the American people. Due to the national security concerns of the case, I have a confidentiality pact not to talk about the fake presidential elections during this time frame from 2024 here to the end of the selection in 2025. On the following day, October 8th, 2024, I went to the National Security Agency in Maryland at Fort Meade and sat down with investigators for the NSA, otherwise known as the adjective pronouns, National Security Agency. Point being, national security has no agency has no closure on their words, and I can define them in any way I want because they do not give closure on who they are, but they do have knowledge of the classification of the fake presidential elections, and I spent two hours with them, giving them the necessary closure to safeguard the former American people and the former United States of America. Citizens, you win and lose by how you choose. Caution, there's a national emergency dealing with martial law. Find neutrality. Blessings on your Nowspace. I am Postmaster-General, Commander-in-Chief, Special-Duty Magistrate-Judge of the U.S.-Supreme Court, Russell-J. Gould.
I got this definition about the full court press from the web, and here's what it says. The full court press. A full court press is a defensive strategy in basketball where the defending team applies intense pressure on the opponent from the opening tip-off to the final buzzer, covering the entire court. The press aims to disrupt the opponent's offense, forcing turnovers and creating scoring opportunities. Effective situations for a full court press. Prevent the opponent from scoring. In tight games, create turnovers and momentum shifting plays. And against teams will handle it poorly by dribbling terribly. They might have low basketball IQ and they can't handle the press. In a transition situation, you can use it to counter an opponent's fast break, forcing them to slow down and potentially leading to turnovers. Why? Each defender should apply individual pressure on their opponent, making it difficult for them to pass and score. In conclusion, a full court press can be effective as a strategy in basketball, but it requires careful planning, execution, adaptation to the opponent's strengths and weaknesses. Russell came out of his mother's womb, I believe, in a full court press. His whole life has been about full court press. He did a full court press on every teacher at every level, with every job that he had, every encounter that he had, probably in every relationship he had with a chick. Russell did the full court press for correctness, for doing the right thing, for his whole life is based upon that. That's just what his heart and soul is all about. I know he was the right guy for this mission to change the entire world. I don't know anyone else who could have been more aptly prepared. Most people don't have it in them to go through what Russell went through and to maintain the composure that he had from such a young age, and in his 20s, capturing the flag, and then 1999 and coming up with a claim of the life, a way to free everyone. You know, I forgot to ask him one question. Did you ever have a conversation with God on, man, I'm going to save the planet? Like, who would pick that? When you normally go to school, they ask you, what do you want to be in life? Oh, I want to be a police officer or a veterinarian or a mom, or you can pick anything. But who picks, I'm going to be the leader of the commander-in-chief of the entire planet? He didn't want that job. That job fell upon him as a part of his destiny and his fate. So full court press is part of his just diagram, is part of his architecture, his DNA. And I'm glad he used a full court press in so many different avenues. And by the way, if you didn't know, he's still playing basketball and he's in his 50s. That's his game of choice. And the full court press, just so you know, if you're a baller, it is a way of life. I knew it. The artist formerly known as Prince was right. The parties are over.